The Halli Casser-Jayne Show airs Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern. The podcast's always available online at HalliCasser-Jayne.com.
Wayne, 3 million healthy dogs and cats are euthanized each year. This drives me personally crazy. And I know that's 80% less, as you say in the book, than what was happening in the 70s. But what about it? Why can't we just simply outlaw this?
Well, because we've got to have enough homes. You know, there are 171 million dogs and cats in our homes, and every year there are probably like 30 million people in the market for a dog or a cat. We could easily solve this problem by having an additional percentage of people in the market for a dog or cat choosing to go to a rescue or a shelter to get the animal who's going to become their friend and family member. Not enough people are making that choice.
All things great and small. If you are an animal lover as I am, then today's The Halli Casser-Jayne Show is just for you. Today on The Halli Casser-Jayne Show, the president and CEO of the nation's largest animal protection organization, the Humane Society of America, Wayne Pacelle, stops by to talk about his eye-opening new book, The Humane Economy, How Innovators and Enlightened Consumers Are Transforming the Lives of Animals. And in our second half hour, you are about to meet one truly unique woman. Her name, Andrea Turkalo, also known as the Elephant Whisperer. What a story she has to tell. We'll be back in a minute with our show. But first, welcome. I am your host, Halli Casser-Jayne. Today, the show is brought to you by our new partner, our favorite store, the finest in offering gourmet foods, Dean and DeLuca. And remember, the Halli Casser-Jayne Show is always available online at HalliCasser-Jayne.com and at a host of venues including Stitcher.com, Spreaker.com, TuneIn Radio, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, the iHeartRadio Network, and at our newest home on Google Play Music. As president and CEO of the nation's largest animal protection organization, the Humane Society of America, Wayne Pacelle is at the helm of a massive mission to drive animal welfare changes across different sectors of the economy, inside boardrooms, newsroom studios, courtrooms, and the halls of Congress and state legislatures across the country. The author of the New York Times bestseller, The Bond, Our Kinship with Animals, Our Call to Defend Them, Pacelle appears frequently as a guest on national news shows and as a speaker at conferences and universities, and is the author of a powerful treatise published this year in Foreign Affairs called The Long Road to Animal Welfare. Now he comes to us with his new important book, The Humane Society, How Innovators and Enlightened Consumers Are Transforming the Lives of Animals, in which Pacelle offers the first full accounting of a revolution sweeping global business and changing forever how we value animals, in a surprising narrative of how entrepreneurs, Fortune 500 CEOs, world-class scientists, and a new class of political leaders, both inspired and pressured by conscious consumers and voters, are collectively remaking our relationship with other species and the natural world. Goodbye puppy mills and factory farms, trophy hunting, safaris, and circuses with wild animal acts, and laboratories confining chimpanzees and cosmetic testing facilities poisoning rabbits. This is the story of the burgeoning, unstoppable growth of the humane economy. Let's talk. Wayne, are you there?
Yes, Halli. How are you? Wayne Pacelle. Thanks
Hi,
for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure to have you on. I just want you to know, in honor of having you on, my 3 rescues are now in my office, so if you hear barking or snoring...
I love it. I love it. Give each one a pat from the president of the Humane Society.
I am doing that, absolutely. Anyway, nice to have you here. Wayne, could it be that we really are turning a corner in animal rights, and the very people who once were the worst culprits are seeing the light and actually contributing to end animal abuse? Wow, is that true?
It's not 100% true, but it's happening company by company, person by person. And isn't that the goal? I mean, the goal is not to have endless criticism and confrontation. The goal is to convert people who are doing the wrong thing and contributing to animal cruelty and abuse, and then moving them toward a better, protective mentality toward animals. And whether it's SeaWorld or whether it's other companies in the field, we want to celebrate the progress that they're making. That's a good thing.
That is a good thing. The title of your book, The Humane Economy, How Innovators and Enlightened Consumers Are Transforming the Lives of Animals. Define what we're talking about here. What is the humane economy?
It's a term that I think I've coined in terms of animals. It really talks about matching our commerce and our business with our values. When you disassociate commerce from your values, you get bad outcomes. But in this world, at this time in 2016, we know too much about animals to be in denial anymore. We know that they feel pain. We know that they are capable of suffering in psychological and physical ways. We know that their lives matter to them. And, we as a society are waking up to animal cruelty, and more consumers are demanding better outcomes for animals. When that happens on a mass scale, that means that the businesses that have traditionally used animals in their operations, whether it's a food company that's supplied by a factory farm, or whether it's a cosmetics company where animals were used in research and development and testing the safety of the cosmetics, or whether it's a fashion company that's been using fur from bobcats or beavers. When the public becomes alert to these problems, a company is at risk if they've got animal cruelty baked into the business model. And my book is really a chronicle of the incredible changes we're seeing in different sectors of the economy: food and ag, the use of live animals in entertainment at theme parks, the cosmetics industry, the chemical industry, the fashion industry. So many other sectors of the economy are now starting to take animals into account and changing some of their most fundamental practices to reflect a better sensibility about animals. And that is really an exciting development, and that's why, my book is a hopeful one. It's not just a catalog of horrors. It's really a chronicle of the changes that we're seeing, and it's a nice thing to see.
Yeah, it's funny that you're going to, my next thing that I was going to say to you is that I have to tell you that I thought what was going to be a very painful read actually might be one of the most hopeful books I've read in quite some time, and I have to applaud you for that. But I have to also ask you, are we being too optimistic here?
Well, I think that we really have to tell a nuanced story here. There's no question that the progress that we've made just in the last 3 or 4 years is extraordinary. I mean, think of the last 6 months. We've had 120 of the biggest names in food retail. So McDonald's, Burger King, the big box stores that sell groceries like Walmart, supermarkets like Kroger, they've all pledged to stop over time purchasing eggs from factory farms that confine the hens in small cages and crates that effectively immobilize the animals. Now, that is going to change the fortunes over time for 300 million laying hens who are jammed in small cages. I don't know if your listeners are aware, but if I've been to these big industrial farms, and the way that chickens are raised for egg production is they're put in a small wire cage. It's called a battery cage. They're cages, side to side as long as a football field, and then they're stacked 8 high. And the cage is about the size of a large microwave. And there are 6 or 8 birds jammed into that cage. They never get out of that cage. I mean, I went to one farm in Iowa that had 10 million birds divided between 93 buildings. I mean, it was just a gigantic, high-rise megalopolis for chickens, but they were so confined and packed in they couldn't even move. Now, to get them out of those cages doesn't solve every animal welfare issue, but it relieves one of the worst things that they're enduring, which is this terrible overcrowding and immobilization. And I think what it also does is it says that we're embracing animal welfare. And once we go down that path of embracing animal welfare, then it leads to subsequent actions that further improve the living conditions of animals. And, I'm optimistic, but I'm also not Pollyanna. The world is still a very rough place for animals, but we're getting better. we need to do better. And the reason that I want people to join with me at the Humane Society of the U.S., why I want them to join as a member, why I want them to read the book and become educated, is we want to build a bigger army. We want to continue to take on these fights, but even with more strength, so we can be catalysts for more change.
This is so interesting to me. First of all, I have been to those farms in Virginia, and I want to tell you what, you never want to go back there after you've seen it once. It's horrifying. Just horrifying. So I'm glad that you gave such a good picture of what the hell is really going on there. That being said, exploiting animals is a practice, as you say, under siege. So that's a good thing. But I want to ask you this. Where in the lane do you perceive the biggest change? Can we establish that this new movement is largely coming from animal lovers themselves? They're the enlightened consumers you speak to in the book's title? Who are they?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's happening on a couple levels. I mean, I think any social reform movement, going back to the history of our country, it's always been a smaller group of more, engaged, maybe you could say the word enlightened people who were the ones driving reform, whether they were abolitionists or whether they were suffragists or whether they're civil rights campaigners or environmentalists. I mean, the history of our country is we've been doing better. We've been making changes to build a civil society and including everybody, protecting the environment. And I think with animal protection, the organized efforts of the Humane Society of the U.S. and other groups have been a big part of it. The key, though, is that our message has kind of percolated through our culture. And now it's become a mainstream sensibility to become, more conscious and aware of animals. So you don't have to be a card-carrying member of the Humane Society of the United States to live your life in a way that reflects a compassionate concern for animals. And that's what is really, it's the twin efforts of the organized, determined activist and advocacy community that's pushing change and demanding change, and then the mass of the rest of the public that's basically saying, I can see that. I think that's the right thing. And that's what forces together the corporations to change. And then when you add in scientists who are giving us new information, when you have documentarians like Gabriella Cowperthwaite, who did Blackfish, which exposed some of the problems at SeaWorld, and that was run on CNN over and over again, that alerts people to the problems. That's how the change is created. It's an ensemble cast of participants that are driving change.
Well, SeaWorld, I live in Florida, certainly has made a sea change. I think that's phenomenal. That is such a model, right, of people working to get change done. But I actually even like the way that the corporate guys came out and changed this whole thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I mean, we at the Humane Society of the U.S. were fierce critics of SeaWorld for many years. We had on our staff the leading anti-SeaWorld advocate, Dr. Naomi Rose, who is an orca PhD scientist who studied orcas in the Puget Sound area. So we were second to no group in being critics, but the goal of criticism is to drive change and to gain acceptance of those ideas. And I've been friendly with a congressman from Orange County, California. He recently retired, but he knew the new CEO of SeaWorld, and he said, listen, I think he's the sort of guy who can change this company, who can reform it from the inside. And he urged me to sit down with him. It was ironic because I had just finished my manuscript of my book, and I was very tough on SeaWorld. So it was a little bit of an awkward conversation to start, and also knowing that I was, not going to rewrite everything in my book. But I sat down with him, and we talked about a pathway forward for the company. And he's a change agent, and he didn't get everywhere, I wanted him to. I would rather more fundamentally reform the business model. But we made some very important reforms that the company should be proud of: ending the breeding of orcas, ending the theatrical shows, redoubling its efforts on rescue and rehabilitation of stranded marine mammals and animals and other animals, and allowing the SeaWorld facilities to be basically a sanctuary or refuge for them. Third, to join the Humane Society of the U.S. in our campaigns against commercial whaling and shark finning. And fourth, which a lot of people don't think of, SeaWorld has more than 20 million visitors a year and 20,000 employees, changing their food policies. So the food that they serve, not sourcing the food from farms that are keeping the animals confined, or from fishing operations that are horribly unsustainable and inhumane. So this was an incredible set of reforms. I was excited about it, and we announced it in mid-March. I think to great applause from people on both sides of the fray.
Oh, absolutely, and like I said, it was done in a classy way that gave people concepts, ideas that they could use in their own corporations and businesses with, dignity. There was dignity to it. Do you understand what I'm saying with that? And
I do.
Yeah, and I think that's important, that nobody felt bludgeoned, if you will, which is a weird word to talk about in this conversation. Wayne, all of this being said, there still remains some startling statistics to reckon with, and I want to talk to you. 3 million healthy dogs and cats are euthanized each year. This drives me personally crazy. And I know that's 80% less, as you say in the book, than what was happening in the 70s, but what about it? Why can't we just simply outlaw this?
Well, because we've got to have enough homes. There are 171 million dogs and cats in our homes, and every year there are probably like 30 million people in the market for a dog or a cat. We could easily solve this problem by having an additional percentage of people in the market for a dog or cat choosing to go to a rescue or a shelter to get the animal who's going to become their friend and family member. Not enough people are making that choice, which is why we still have 2.7 million dogs and cats killed in shelters every year. All we need each year are an additional 3 million people out of a population of 300 million to bring an animal into their life through that source. But legislating it, is not going to solve it, because it's just going to forbid the euthanasia, and then, it's going to push it somewhere else. And we need people to solve this problem. It's not that the shelter is culpable necessarily. The shelters have to be professional. They've got to do good marketing. They've got to be capable and competent, because lives are at stake. But ultimately, if not enough people are acquiring those animals, there's just a basic arithmetic problem that there are too many animals and too few homes. But
we don't euthanize people. So what's the difference here? If we're saying that animals are feeling emotional, parts of the world of life, then why would we even go there? Why can't we find solutions? In housing, I just think it goes against everything. I just am so against this. And so,
well, I agree with you, and we should be outraged by it. This should not become normal to accept the killing of millions of healthy and adoptable animals. The issue is, I think we've got to look outside of the shelters, and we've got to ask our fellow family members and our business colleagues and our friends, why are you getting a dog from a pet store? Why are you getting a dog through an internet site? Go to the local shelter. Go to the rescue group. You'll get a fabulous animal, and you will not be contributing to the puppy mill industry, and you'll be saving the lives of these animals. So I'm with you in the broad sense. I talk about this in the book and how we get there. One of the things we're doing at the Humane Society, we've got a Pets for Life program, and we focus on people in zip codes where the folks are at or below the poverty line. Much of the breeding is going on in these communities, not because the people don't love the animals, but because they've got pet care deserts. And the folks there who want to do the right thing, they don't have access to transportation to go to a vet who might be 15 miles away, and also it may be too expensive for them. So we're bringing the services to these zip codes, and people are flocking to us. So having more strategic work on the animal protection side is also going to help solve this problem, which is, I think, partly what you're talking about. We need to do our job in a better way.
I think that's fabulous, by the way, what you guys are doing on that. I think that is the clue, because that brings me up to, spaying and neutering. So expensive. And how mmany homes have more than one animal in them now, pets in them? Everybody has a dog.
Yeah, a lot. A lot of people have multiple animals. I've got a dog and a cat, and that's common.
Right.
And
not always.
There are obviously a lot of people with more than 6 animals in their home.
Well, and there's that, but there's also people who are poor who can barely afford to feed themselves, but they have their animals in their house too. And so then it gets into the issue of where do we get the finances to, spay and neuter. And I want to talk a little bit about that. How do we solve a problem called, where we go with this? I mean, there are new drugs on the market. And let me give you a real quick background. I lived on a farm for a very long time. And there were feral cats everywhere. And this is, outside of Washington, not too far from where you are. And I have to tell you what, you couldn't get the community to do anything about it. And I would say, aren't there ways to inoculate these wild animals so they don't procreate at these ridiculous rates? The farms are filled with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of cats. Is there something we can do about that?
Well, I do talk about this in my book, and one of the arguments I make in the book is that the combination of kind of moral passion to get better outcomes for animals, combined with innovation and technology, can lead us into a better future. And I talk in my chapter about companion animals, about dogs and cats, how there are people spending millions right now, and the Humane Society has been part of this to a degree, developing a fertility control drug. So, we had the pill obviously was a huge revolution in contemporary society when women could take a pill and prevent pregnancy. And birth control has been a big part of the human experience forever, but in contemporary times more so because we've had more ways to do it. When we develop the equivalent of a pill for dogs and cats, we will be much closer to solving this euthanasia problem. Surgical sterilization, which has become normalized because of the work of the Humane Society over the last 40 or 50 years, requires a professional, requires a veterinarian. It takes some time, it's costly, and it prices out, some
right.
segment of the American population that can't afford it, which is why so many animal groups do low-cost or no-cost spay and neuter, and why our Pets for Life program is such a revolutionary strategy that you don't, go to an area in the suburbs where people have a high average income and 95% of the animals are spayed and neutered. You go to the Indian reservations or you go to the inner city where people are struggling economically and also don't have access to the services. So we're being much more tactical in our approaches to this.
So much of this is about money, right? It makes you crazy because if people had the money, they would do it. They don't want to have to continue to feed all these cats and this, that, and the other thing that's going on. So it is a money issue. And speaking of money issue, you talk in the book about pet insurance. You also, have adopted, a rescue who had a lot of problems. Fortunately, you could afford to take care of them. Other people can't. You suggest pet insurance, but even pet insurance these days is outrageously expensive for the guy who's working 3 jobs just to put food on the kid's table today. What are your thoughts on that? And let me put a comma there. We might as well tackle all of this at the same time. When I'm having this conversation with other people, what I hear a lot, Wayne? I hear vets are so expensive. In some cases, it's more expensive than going to the doctor for me. Talk to me.
Well, it's true. Medical services for animals are becoming much more specialized. You've got specialists who focus on eyes or heart problems or you name it. I mean, it's just like human medicine. It's becoming much more tailored. And these are people who, go multiple years after their undergraduate work into a professional school. They've got debt. The prices are getting up there. Now, when you think of it, the human medical system is predicated on this notion of health insurance, but we haven't had that for pets. So if some catastrophic circumstance happens for our pet, I mean, are we going to deal with thousands of dollars in vet bills? Obviously, the notion of pet health insurance is a hedge against that. It means you outlay some modest amount of money on a regular basis in order to protect yourself against a larger scale or catastrophic medical condition that the animal has. It's not going to be there for everyone, but let's face it, we've had real trouble and debate over the issue of human health care as well. And obviously that's been kind of one of the central issues in recent American politics. So it's going to be controversial with pets as well, but I think it's part of the offerings that are now developing so that people can be responsible custodians of their pets, pet keepers, and it gives them options. And for those who can afford it but cannot afford a catastrophic circumstance, it's the right move for them.
Yeah, fascinating. So many good things in this book, so many great stories of innovation and companies really coming to the fore, and people in specifics. Real quick, Planet of the Apes and the Noah writers and directors, even on that, we've seen some revolutionary new concepts about using animals in films. And I mean real quick, just give us, so we have some positive story here.
Planet of the Apes, for those of you who've seen Dawn or Rise of Planet of the Apes, I mean, vivid, incredible imagery with the action scenes, with the chimps and the gorillas being so real. None of it happened with live animals. Computer-generated imagery, CGI technologies, motion capture and performance capture technologies were used, which I talk about in detail in the book. Just remarkable use of technology to settle a long-standing problem of the use of wild animals in film. I mean, lots of problems with where the animals are obtained, how they're cared for when they're offset, how they're treated on set, and just the limited capabilities that we've got by using live animals. Noah, the movie that Darren Aronofsky did, which I talk about, no movie had a higher degree of difficulty in representing animals than Noah because it's two of everything. Couldn't do it with live animals. The only way he could do it was with CGI, and I talked to him for this conversation in the book. Pretty incredible stuff. I hope people read it.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely fascinating, and those kind of answers are great answers to long-term problems. Thanks God for innovation and that we move forward. At the end of the human economy, you offer 10 things we can each do to contribute to the humane economy. Just give us your favorite example so that people understand how they can contribute.
I mean, in very practical terms, vote with your dollars. Every time you enter the marketplace, you vote for or against cruelty with your purchasing practices. Second, join and support the Humane Society of the U.S. and other groups that help animals. It's through our collective exertion of influence that we can really change the whole of society. It's tough when it's just, individuals trying to change the world. When a million of us get together, big things can happen.
What do you see as the biggest obstacle in the future to getting where you want to go?
We have so many problems to confront. Now we're fighting the dog meat trade in South Korea. There are 17,000 dog meat farms. I mean, probably the greatest thing I face as a challenge at the Humane Society of the United States is the incredible diversity of exploitation and the entrenched interests that are defending these activities. Now we're breaking through, and that should be hopeful for people and should encourage them to do more, but it's still an immense task, and that's why we want more people to be involved with us.
At the end of your list of the 10 things we can all do to contribute to the humane economy, you say this, which I love, Wayne. I love this. Live as if all life matters. That's you.
It's so simple, right? These animals, they have the same spark of life that we have, and the things that we do have implications all over the planet. We just don't realize it because we don't see the supply chains that connect to our consumer practices. If we could, if it were more transparent, many of us would take more action, but we're trying to knit these things together and call people of conscience to act, and as you say, to live life as all life matters.
Mr. Pacelle is quoted as saying, "Here in this humane economy, human ingenuity meets human virtue, and we discover at last that we can have it both ways, a better world for us and animals, too." I've been speaking with Wayne Pacelle, President and CEO of the nation's largest animal protection organization, the Humane Society of America. His new book, a must-read, is The Humane Economy, How Innovators and Enlightened Consumers Are Transforming the Lives of Animals, by way of William Morrow. For more information on the Humane Society of America, visit www.humanesociety.org. You are listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. My guests today are President and CEO of the Humane Society of America, Wayne Pacelle, and field biologist, the woman known as the Elephant Whisperer, Andrea Turkalo. We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. Hi, this is Halli Casser-Jayne. Are you enjoying the show? I hope so. And I hope that you'll tell your friends about it and help us grow our family. How can you help? That's easy. Share the link to the show with your friends or my show's player. And I would love it even more if you'd recommend they visit my website at HalliCasser-Jayne.com. I look forward to seeing all of you there. And we are back on the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Thank you for being here. Field biologist Andrea Turkalo has been called the elephant whisperer. She is the world's leading expert on forest elephants, working tirelessly to map the sometimes inaudible language of elephants in an effort to put together the world's first elephant dictionary. Many years ago, she'd gone to Africa to do aid work, but was drawn to the intricate lives of these elephants. She turned her life around to be near them, settling in a rough camp in the rainforest and building an observation platform where she could safely watch the animals that congregate there. It's called the Zangabai, a clearing the size of several football fields that is rich in the mineralized mud that the elephants depend on. It was to become Miss Turkalo's home and her life's work. But Turkalo's 22 years with those elephants came to a disastrous end a couple of years ago when civil war in the Central African Republic found its way to the Bai. Turkalo had lived through civil strife before, but this time it was much worse. The threat came from the Salika, the Muslim rebels who had overthrown the national government in the spring of 2013, and Turkalo had no choice but to leave her friends, the elephants. I'll let Andrea Turkalo share what happened next. Let's talk. Hi, Andrea.
Great to be with you, Helen.
Tell us of this harrowing experience over the next few weeks after this initial getaway you had to make. You made your way out of the camp and headed downriver towards the Democratic Republic of Congo by boat. And what happened next?
Well, actually, I went to the Republic of Congo, but it's right next door to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, I went downriver, and we had to leave pretty abruptly. So I took what I needed, which was basically all my data and my images and my recordings, and got in a boat with 4 other women. And we had 2 Africans with us. One was steering the boat, and we left at about dusk. And fortunately, it was a very beautiful evening. There was a full moon, so we could basically see the river as we headed out of the country. We weren't in any immediate danger at that point, but we knew that if we stayed, we risked that. So we decided to leave. And actually, I spent 3 weeks in Congo, and then I went back up to my site with one of the other people, an Englishwoman named Anna Feisner. But we only had about 2 additional nights before we had to leave again because there was another threat of rebels coming into our area.
And then you went back, and what did you find?
Well, the Bai was fine. Zongo was fine. I had one beautiful day in the clearing. I had actually a new baby to a female I had known for many years. But there was this anxiety that we weren't going to be able to stay. We were just trying, we were just optimists, but it didn't work out. So we had to leave again. And so Anna and I left again, and then we spent a couple of days in Congo, and then we evacuated to neighboring Cameroon, where I caught a flight back to the U.S.
But at one point you did go back to the Bai, and you found 26 elephants shot?
Oh, no, I wasn't there when that happened. That happened a couple of weeks after I left, definitely. I actually received emails and messages that poaching was impending. Everybody knows about this clearing and the abundance of wildlife, especially forest elephants. You can see between 40 and 100 each day. So, people knew that these elephants were there, and the Salika weren't any different. So they found their way to the clearing, and they slaughtered, about 26 elephants.
And you heard that when you were in the States, back in the States? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I actually heard that these people were on their way to the clearing because they were asking people, how do we get there? So someone actually showed them, and, they got there and mowed down 26 elephants with automatic weapons.
It boggles the mind. I don't even know how anybody could do that. It's beyond. But I have to ask you this. You work with these animals for so long, and I'm sure that you knew one from the other. You've been documenting for so long. What's your reaction to something like that when you've been that close to these beautiful creatures? Talk to me on a feeling level and talk to me on a thinking level.
Well, I've been in Africa for over 30 years, and I've been pretty hardened by what I've seen, but I've never tried to lose my humanity in terms of how I deal with people. But Africa is a very complicated place. There's a lot of corruption. People have very little economic opportunity. And as a result, people hammer their natural resource base at an unprecedented rate, especially today. So, when I left, I knew the situation was incredibly tenuous, and that eventually these elephants were going to be targeted. I'd always known that. And with all the political instability, it happened. Did I get emotional about it? I'm not a very emotional person in terms of my study subjects, the elephants. I mean, I love them dearly, but I know what elephants are up against these days, and, we've lost so many continent-wide. It didn't surprise me that this happened. But on the upside, this poaching incident actually motivated a lot of people to become very active in, the whole poaching situation throughout Africa. So I don't think they died in vain. I think people are now much more aware of what's going on in terms of poaching and how many elephants we're losing daily.
Talk to me about elephants in your work. Why elephants? Of all the creatures on Earth, what is it about elephants that drew you to them?
It was actually an accident. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. No one had ever studied this population of elephants, and they are forest elephants, and no one had ever studied them by actually observing them. And Zongo lends itself perfectly to this type of study where you can identify individuals and follow family lineages over generations. I had been in the Central African Republic as a Peace Corps volunteer, so I learned French and also a local language, Zongo. So when this opportunity presented itself to me with a biological background that I had, it was just a perfect fit. And, I started the study in 1990, having no idea that it would blossom into this incredible wealth of information on an animal we knew so little about. So, I feel very privileged and fortunate to have this opportunity given to me.
Before we get into some of what you've learned by studying them, I want to ask, let's define these forest elephants. What's the difference between savanna elephants and the forest elephants? And tell us about the threat they specifically face. I read that their numbers fell by 62% between 2002 and 2011 to about 100,000. In fact, savanna elephants' populations have also declined, but at a slower rate. So talk to me about all of that.
Yeah, forest elephants, they were literally unknown until we started the study, and there are several other studies actually in the Central African region now occurring. But they're smaller. They had a reputation of being more aggressive, which they really aren't. Some of them are very, mild and friendly animals. Their ivory is much different from savanna elephant ivory. It's harder, and it's actually artisans prefer this forest ivory because it's harder. It's much easier to carve, and it can be much more intricately carved. So, that's what these elephants are being targeted for. And I like to think they're actually a much more attractive elephant. They have finer tusks, rounder ears, and of course they're smaller. But they aren't much more aggressive. And they are being targeted for their ivory. And it's true what you said. We lost about 60% over that 10-year period in the Central African region, and that has happened because we've had so much civil unrest. I mean, when I went to Central Africa in 1980, we could basically drive anywhere in the country. Now, that's all over. We have to be very careful about where we go, and with the current situation, it's impossible to move around. So I've seen a lot of deterioration in local security and my sense of safeness.
Yeah, horrible. Let's stay on these these forest elephants that fascinate me. They're highly social creatures, so let's first talk about that. I want people to understand, there are too many, I think, that because of the world that we live in today, don't even get to see, animals, period. They see a dog, they see a cat, they see a goat, maybe, but most people don't get to be around four-legged. Talk to me about elephants.
Well, I'm very fortunate also because I live 2 kilometers from this clearing, and I live in the forest in a rudimentary camp, but I do have electricity, and we dug a well. So I live very simply, but we are basically surrounded by elephants. We hear them all the time, day and night. We encounter them, during the day, even walking to this clearing. I've only once felt personally threatened by an elephant, and that was over a year ago when I was badly charged when I was in a river, and I did something. I had thought about this for a long time because we often have close encounters, but I actually dove in the water and hid behind some vegetation. And fortunately, elephants don't see well. And this elephant got very close, and he kept on looking around, but I kept very still, and he finally lost his interest and left me. So, our lives are just imbued with these animals, and at night, they're active all the time. One thing about elephants is they don't sleep like people do. They don't have extended periods of sleep, so they take little naps, and they're basically active all day and all night. So, we hear them all the time. It's sort of like a Jungle Book existence. And I really miss it because the first thing that strikes me when I get back to the U.S. or any, developed country is the noise. There's so much artificial noise in our environment, and I'm very sensitive to that. And I think what I miss most about being in the forest is just the abundance of natural sound.
And speaking of sound, that's something that you've been trying to categorize. You've been trying to map out, I guess, their language. Talk to us a little bit about that. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, in the year 2000, someone called Katie Payne contacted me, and Katie's well known because she wrote a book about elephants because she had studied savanna elephants. She'd never studied forest elephants, but she discovered infrasound in elephants. They make sounds we don't hear that are below the threshold of our hearing, and they use these low frequencies to communicate. So she proposed that we start a project where we look at their communication, the communication in forest elephants, and she came and spent 6 months at Zonga with me, with a team of very able people, and we started looking at communication in forest elephants. And my job was particularly, it was like a new step for me into elephant consciousness because I knew all the genealogies of all these elephants. I spent, over 10 years when I met her identifying elephant groups and how they were related. And my forte was that I could predict vocal events between related elephants. Say elephant A is related to elephant B, and B comes into the clearing and sees elephant A, then I would, I could predict that those two elephants would interact vocally. So that was a whole new level for me, and it made my work, what should I say, much more interesting, because now I was seeing that there was something more than elephants just being related, that they actually communicated with each other.
Do they communicate with you?
They communicate with, I'm sorry?
Do they communicate with you?
No.
You really stay far away.
I keep myself completely. I don't want to know these elephants on a personal basis. I don't want to influence their behavior. And my feeling is that this clearing is, for me, a very, sacred place. I'm not religious, but Zonga is like one of those places that don't exist in the world. It's just an extraordinary place. You walk through a forest, you don't see anything, and then all of a sudden there's this opening in the forest, and there are all these elephants, and people that come there are just totally astounded. So I think it needs our total respect, and I try not to make any noise when I'm there. I try to respect the elephant's space because, they're being hammered in so many other places. I think I owe it to them just to let this place be theirs.
Do they know you're there, you think?
Well, they know we're there. They know people are there because of this platform, but because they feel safe in the area, they're there all the time. I mean, the problem with when they were poached by the Seleka was that they felt safe. They didn't know these people that were walking to the clearing that were going to shoot them. So they have this strong association of being safe. So, they know we're there, but they accept our presence.
So over all of these years, I have to ask you, what's been the most extraordinary thing that you have witnessed within the herd, within the familial, association between them? What fascinates you the most in terms of that?
Well, the family ties are incredibly strong. Over the 23 years that I've been studying this population, I've only witnessed 2 births in the clearing, if you can believe that. And I've recorded over 1,000 births to females that I know, but I haven't seen them. They just show up with these new babies. But on one of the occasions, one of the cows that gave birth. It was her first calf, and I knew the family very well. She gave birth to the calf in the middle of the clearing in the afternoon, and she was harassed by everyone. I mean, every elephant in the clearing came over to check out that baby who was trying to stand up, kept falling down and crying. And I was getting stressed just watching this, and there was actually a young bull that was trying to copulate with this mother who had just given birth. So there was just complete chaos in the clearing. And then about 20 minutes after the birth, I looked to my right, and there was this, the new mother's, probably her aunt. And she came into the clearing, and she basically took over and led Marina, who was the new mother, away with the baby to safety. And I was just, that was pretty emotional to see, because it showed a real caring on this other cow's part, this older, experienced female. You know, she had had like 4 or 5 calves, so she knew what was going on and led Marina off out of the clearing into the forest. So that was pretty touching.
I don't know how you don't get attached. I see that you name them, though, and I find that interesting. Why do you name them if you don't want to be attached? I mean, I've always been told with all the animals that I've brought in over the years, and there are many, I live on a farm part-time myself, that don't name them if you're going to eat them, you know, that old story, but you know what I'm saying.
I just, names just give them identities. In some studies, they just give them numbers, like letters and numbers. I find that a little bit too, unattached. But you give them names, it helps you remember them much easier. I don't really get emotional. I mean, I do get emotional, but the bottom line is I'm just a realist. I'm a skeptical realist, and I think that keeps me sane. If I had gotten really emotionally attached to these animals and had to leave like I did, it probably would have affected me terribly.
Right. But they are your life, right? I mean, that's the center of your existence for a very long time. I find that equally fascinating. Are you a loner?
Yeah, it's a good question. I am actually a loner in many senses of the word. I like to be with people, and I can be very social, and I think I make good conversation with people. But I really cherish my time alone because I like to read, and I have other, hobbies, and I like to listen to music. I feel like I get very focused, and I need downtime, and the way I get the downtime is being alone.
I can certainly relate to that. I want to talk about the environment of the Bai. The environment for forest elephants, the environment, how much are they having the same struggle with the environment there that they are in the savannah and other parts of Africa?
Well, I mean, if you talk of their natural environment, they're pretty spoiled because food is available all year round. The quality changes, and there's never any drought in the forest. They have lots of water. So I like to think the elephants are spoiled in the forest. And they've been pretty well protected over the years because it's difficult to hunt them in forests. But that's changing. There's a lot more incursion. Human demography is changing. People are moving into areas that weren't inhabited. I mean, just the time I've spent in the Central African Republic, I've seen a lot of demographic change, and it's been negatively impacting on elephants where they do exist. And
can the remoteness work against them also? Because if some group, like this particular group, Lusalico, that went in there, could find them, then they're open season because they are so remote and it's hard to keep the bad guys out?
Yeah, I mean, our major problem right now is protecting these elephants. When you do guard protect, we have game guards, and their main problem is the main problem is we don't have enough of them. And all the surveillance they have to do is on foot because it's impossible to do it by vehicle because the roads, are only restricted to certain areas, and you can't drive trucks in the forest unless there is a road, and you can't do any aerial kind of surveillance because when you go up in an airplane and look down at the forest, it looks like you're looking at broccoli. So, it's labor intensive, and we can't cover areas sufficiently to protect these animals. So, yeah, the remoteness works. It's a double-edged sword for elephants living in forest.
Okay, so what do you want to see done about this to stop this disgusting slaughter for nothing really more than what? Money. It's always money, isn't it? Money.
Yeah, and the sad part is the people at the bottom that are doing the poaching aren't making a lot of money. But the economics in Africa are pretty, horrendous. People live on, less than $1 a day. So unless the economic situation improves for Africans, this pillaging of Africa is going to continue. And it starts with, people on the ground, and it works its way into the government. So that is the problem. But on the other hand, we have to stop this demand for ivory. I mean, in the last 4 years, I think the price of ivory has tripled in China. It's gone from $750 a kilo, to over $2,100 right now a kilo. So, that's a huge problem. So if we can stop this demand and make the Chinese and also other people that are interested in buying ivory realize that this is going to lead to the extinction of elephants, then there's no hope. If we can't convince them, then, the elephants are doomed. They may have 10 to 20 years left.
Sickening. From your perch or where you are now, what are you doing? How are you staying connected over there to Africa and the protection of these animals?
Well, I'm hoping to get back. The game guards are working in the national park I work in, which is Nzonga-Doki National Park. These people have been under a lot of duress. And in many ways, I feel guilty and helpless that I'm not able to do more. I mean, I'm just trying to keep up to date on things that are happening and, people in the area and communicating with them. But, it's been a hard slog being here and just watching the news and, the deterioration of a place that I lived in for many years.
So all those years living in the Bay, politics has brought you back to the States. So I have to ask you, would you rather be living with with elephants or with people? Tell me which.
Well, I am a human being, but when I look at the human race today, we're capable of doing such extraordinary things, but we are the absolute best species at destruction. And that's what discourages me. I think every day I try to live positively and try to do my best to be kind to other human beings. But some of the cruelty and some of the destruction that I'm witnessing, even today it discourages me. I think we just all have to try more, and treat each other much better than we do. But, some people don't get it. And, all I can say is I just do my best.
Well, your best is pretty darn good. One last question. All these years living with the elephants, what have they taught you?
They taught me that it's not so difficult to be kind and to care about each other. Animals don't go to war. They don't necessarily kill each other except, predator-prey relationships, which are a normal occurrence in nature. But elephants, they emulate so much of what is positive in being human. And I think they've taught me a lot about being human and appreciating what I have and trying to treat, my fellow human beings best, as well as animals.
Andrea Turkalo has made her life's mission the study of elephants and to save them. To experience the majesty of observing a herd of elephants in the wild is a sight to behold, a true gift. Ms. Turkalo has been quoted as saying that it is a privilege to study the elephants. It has been a privilege to have Andrea Turkalo as my guest on the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. For more information on Andrea Turkalo and her truly extraordinary work, visit the Wildlife Conservation Society at www.wcs.org. Thanks so much for being here, Andrea. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Halli.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a production of Resec LLC. Associate producer, Suzanne Probst. Music by Tony Rosales Jazz. Visit HalliCasserJayne.com.